talk about America's Lord and Savior, Donald Jehoshaphat Trump. They're not booing, they're saying Bruce for no apparent reason. When Trump ran for president, he had an urgent message about the state of our country.
Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. We are a nation in decline. We have to fight for our country, and we have to fight like we've never fought before. It's like we're a giant garbage can.
How dare you? If anything, America is a recycling bin. Useless and made almost entirely of plastic. But that's it. We have to fight to save our country. And now Daddy's home. And he's about to take out the trash. And 2 weeks into the Trump presidency, we have a better sense of the evil and powerful forces that have been dragging our once great nation into decline.
The Trump administration removed transgender references from federal government websites. It now reads LGB instead of LGBT.
They have no idea the damage T was doing to our nation. Consonants! Because I think you'll agree with me, there is no T in USA. If you spell it out, obviously, that becomes an issue. And if you want a BLT for lunch, things can get ugly. But nothing will stop America's low T, like no T. What other changes are making us great again?
The Trump administration ordering all gender ideology references be removed, including pronouns and email signatures.
Oh, yeah. Consonants and pronouns. Your next prepositions. No more pronouns and email signatures. Good luck signing your emails now, President She. Or should I say President Him? Those are just the actions that this president has taken to prove that he's still kind of a dick. But believe me, he hasn't taken his eye off of America's true nation-state enemies.
President Trump is reiterating his threat to, quote, take back the Panama Canal.
Trump suggesting he could use military force to take Greenland.
President Trump had a fiery phone call with Denmark's prime minister, putting the NATO ally in crisis mode.
Denmark, Panama, Greenland, the axis of, where are those? Now, lest you think that pronouns and Panama were the twin forces shackling America to a prison of national decay, there are also more powerful forces at play in this dangerous world. Some of them closer than what you might have ever imagined.
A new era of trade wars. Trump says tariffs are coming on Canada and Mexico and even the European Union.
What is happening? The EU? Canada? Do we have any friends? I mean, Mexico, I get. Trump's been hate-f***ing Mexico pretty much since the escalator. That's the truth. But Canada? Canada? We're picking a fight with our most reliable and pleasant friend, the Labradoodle of allies? But I guess that's Trump tough. You know what I mean? You gotta walk into the prison yard. Walk right up to the one guy who really doesn't seem to be a problem at all. And just, yeah! Take that, best friend! Who has willingly signed up to fight in every ridiculous war we've ever gotten into. Let that be a lesson to the rest of the world. We are a terrible friend. Denmark, Panama, and Canada. We're America. We used to fight the Nazis. Now we're scouring the globe for easy marks? What are we like, the Jake Paul of nations? I know. Is that what we're doing? No offense. I know China's out there, but Panama's a legitimate fight. In fact, I'm going to call everyone out in FIFA's CONCACAF division. Yeah! Oh, Trinidad and Tobago, you got to gang up, huh? That honestly, like, I can't believe you laughed at a CONCACAF joke. Soccer is back, baby. Look at me getting all skewed in the tie. Now, in Trump's defense, he did explain today why we're going after Canada.
I mean, I look at some of the deals made, I say, who the hell made these deals are so bad?
So bad. The trade deals with Canada, they're so bad. He's just looking and saying, who made these? Ladies and gentlemen, don't get ahead of me. Ladies and gentlemen, for your dining and dancing pleasure, come with me into the Wayback Machine to 2018. I give you the culprit of the terrible deal with Canada.
This morning, President Trump signed a new trade deal to replace NAFTA with the leaders of Mexico and Canada.
The best trade deal they say ever made.
No! A deal done by Trump's greatest nemesis, Trump. Now, hold on. Deal. All right. But President Trump, this trade war has awoken a sleeping giant. Not Canada, not Mexico, but the Democratic minority Senate leader. Release the Schumer!
It's going to affect beer, okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac, because what is guacamole made of? Avocados.
Your response to the trade war is to tell us guacamole is made of avocados? Is that what? When the people found out, when the people find out the precious Super Bowl dip is comprised of mainly avocado, also tomato, sometimes onion, it's a bit much. For me, obviously, with the Spilkis and... Excuse me one second. Democrats, can you please stop trotting Schumer out there every time Trump traverses into the unreal? He's not good at this. What is the decision-making process here? Hey, who should we get out there to effectively battle one of the most savvy presidential media manipulators in history? Oh, I don't know. How about Schumer? He's uninteresting, but at least he's monotone. Oh, wait, and Chuck, before you go out there, you look too young. Put on these readers and lower them on your nose. Perfect. Honestly, listening to Chuck Schumer speak on almost any topic makes me want to bomb Canada. Kidding, of course, by the way. We have a couple of Canadians here from Montreal, and I don't want to upset them because I'm going to need an apartment soon. Now, before we... Now, before we get rattled by Trump's 2 to 2.5 front trade war, Please understand, Mexico has already today received a 30-day stay on tariffs by promising 10,000 troops to the border, and we've promised to stop the inflow of guns. So, self-invented crisis averted. But what can Canada do? I'm sure there's an equally performative gesture Canada could make.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
Mexico, you just sent a few troops to the border. But Canada, if you could, I don't know, cease to exist as an independent entity. Fair? What's that, Mexico? No, there's only 51 states. There's no 52nd. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Washington, D.C.? Yeah, go yourself. All right. What's that, Puerto Rico? No, it's Canada. I think you know why. Canada. All right. Of course, by the way, since we even were writing this show at like 4 p.m., Trump has already said now he's going to pause the tariff war with Canada as well because... Of course, it makes sense to wrap up the trade war right now so that we as a country can focus on the biggest thing that's weakening our great nation.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. MAGA worlds blamed this scourge for everything from the fires in California to the attack on Bourbon Street to inflation to the Baltimore Bridge collapse to why your children are confused about the race of mermaids. Because mermaids, boys and girls, are gingers. They've always been there. The latest example being the plane crash in Washington. It was the DEI-ist. But don't take my word for it. Let's let MTV's Road Rules star and Fox and Friends B-teamer explain DEI.
You can't focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion when you try to hire air traffic controllers. You want the best. You want the brightest protecting yourself and your family.
We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. It is colorblind and merit-based.
Look, there's a lot of reasons why the FAA is in a bad place. But these guys would have you believe that the main problem is that standards were somehow lowered to make sure that a black person or a gay person gets a chance to land your plane, even though the requirements to become an air traffic controller are the same. But by culture warring this tragedy, Americans spent that terrible night holding their breath that the pilot or the air traffic controller wouldn't be a woman or a black person or in a wheelchair. Because what they're trying to do is make the default setting on competence in America a white guy. That's what this is, a reset to the factory default. Because, of course, these two are there purely based on merit and smarts. It's just taken for granted. It undercuts every black person of color, woman in this country, that the job that they have, they don't deserve. It's the mantra in the Republican Party that gives you brain-turning moments like this.
In the United States of America, we get ahead and succeed by merit and merit alone.
Yes, merit and merit alone, says RNC chairwoman Lara, hold on, let me get my glasses. Trump. It was a blind submission, never saw her name on the application. That's the irony of this whole thing. The people standing next to Trump on that terrible night, blaming DEI and trying to reinstall white guys as the only non-suspect pool of hires are themselves DEI hires. For one particular identity that they possess, the ass kisser.
The president's leadership has been remarkable during this crisis. Mr. President, you make our jobs a lot easier.
I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. Thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir.
I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President.
The president is right.
And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President.
DEI. Sucking ego inflation. Obviously, if you think of sucking as a compound word. But you can gaslight us all you want, because the one thing you didn't count on is our secret weapon.
The roots of democracy are deep. People are aroused. I haven't seen people so aroused in a very, very long time in terms of trying to get this done.
Aroused?
We all know Donald Trump isn't a details kind of guy. We elected him to come up with big, brilliant ideas like renaming the Gulf of Mexico. No one else could have thought of that or should have thought of that. But it's okay that he's not big on details because during the campaign, he promised us that he knew a guy.
I'm going to appoint Elon Musk, who's a fantastic guy, to lead a government efficiency commission tasked with saving trillions of dollars in fraud, waste, and abuse. We have tremendous fat.
Oh, don't take the bait, Desi. Don't take the bait. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. Okay. That's right, Elon Musk, the world's richest man and guy who cheers in the wrong parts of Saving Private Ryan. Trump promised us that he'd give Elon full access to the federal government, pull it to the side and get all up in it. And unlike his wedding vows, this is a promise he kept.
Elon Musk's sweeping push to make over the federal government, sparking Democratic panic and warnings of a constitutional crisis.
Now we have learned that his team has gained access to something extraordinarily sensitive, the system that the Treasury Department uses to disperse almost every check and expenditure of any kind made by the U.S. government.
That is a vast database with millions of Americans' personal information on it.
Yeah, Elon Musk has access to your social security number, and that is not cool. If you want our personal data, Elon, you go buy it off the dark web like everyone else, okay? Now, you might be thinking, I don't want white nationalist Tony Stark to have sole control of the inner workings of the federal government, but relax. It's not just Elon. He has a fully equipped team.
Longtime government employees this week were shocked to find that their new supervisors from Elon Musk's Doge department include recent college and high school graduates between 19 and 24 years old. One of the young men is apparently a former intern at Musk's Neuralink company who goes by the online handle Big Balls.
Great! Big Balls has my social security number. Now I feel better. I know we complained about our leaders being too old, but doesn't this go a little too far in the other direction? Surely there must be a middle ground somewhere between crypto bros and crypt keepers. Not only that, Musk has been installing his big balls in a whole bunch of little-known agencies that are crucial in actually running the government. The GSA, the OPM, the OMB, the OC, and SVU. Now, Elon Musk isn't just going to get full access to the federal government just to sit back and watch it function like he's some sort of cuck. No, he's going to jump in there and do some cutting.
This weekend, Musk taking aim at the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, which is in charge of dispensing tens of billions of dollars in foreign aid.
USAID employees are waking up this morning to an email notice telling them not to show up to work today, as Musk says he is shutting the agency down.
Yes, the richest man in the world is cutting off aid to poor countries. Why can't you just be a normal billionaire and co-host Shark Tank or run an NBA team into the ground? Now, I'm not saying there's not some cuts to be made in foreign aid spending. You just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Or what's the expression I'm looking for?
As we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a ball of worms. And so at the point at which you don't merely, like if you've got an apple that's got a worm in it, maybe you can take the worm out. But if you've got actually just a ball of worms, it's hopeless. And USAID is a ball of worms. Mm-hmm. There is no apple. And when there is no apple, you've just got to basically get rid of the whole thing.
Okay, We get it. We get the metaphor. You don't have to keep saying worms over and over again. You know, I have a metaphor too. Elon Musk's charisma reminds me of a ball of worms. Now, of course, USAID was codified by an act of Congress. So if Trump thinks he can have Elon Musk kill it, he must have a strong legal reason for why he can do that without an act of Congress.
Will it take an act of Congress to do away with USAID, or do you believe you have...
I don't know. I don't think so.
Or not. Why should he know? He's just the president. Donald Trump is also reducing the government workforce, although his interests seem to be less about cost cutting and more about sweet, sweet revenge.
Tremendous unrest inside the FBI as prosecutors and agents who worked on the January 6th investigation are being targeted.
It looks like a wholesale purge of the FBI. As you know, already the 8 top officials at the Federal Bureau of Investigation have either been fired or forced to resign. Now, the FBI is being asked to produce a list of every employee who worked on any case related to January 6th. I am told this is some 6,000 FBI employees all told.
What the f***? These agents were doing their job, enforcing the law, and now they're getting fired? That is not how it works. I cannot believe I have to explain firing to the star of The Apprentice. That was your whole fake job. And this is obviously just the beginning, because Trump is going to be targeting everyone that's ever come after him. And I just want to say, I'm not scared. So, Mr. Trump, bring it on, okay? Bring it on. That's coming from me, Jordan Klepper, K-L-E-P-P-E-R. Every day since Trump came into office, he bombards us with ridiculous policies. We go crazy trying to keep up with them, and before we can catch our breath, he hits us with something else even more absurd. It is exhausting and unsustainable. So, starting today, no more of that, okay? No more. No more. I have a whole script here full of important issues that I want to talk about, and I'm not going to let Donald Trump distract me with some crazy new idea.
This morning, a stunning proposal from an American president. Donald Trump, with the Israeli prime minister by his side, declaring that the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. We'll own it.
Okay, let me just ask, what? And also, what?
President Trump made a surprising suggestion last night during a press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The United States, he said, should take over the war-torn Gaza Strip and redevelop it into something like a seaside resort.
We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East.
What the f***? Trump is going to turn Gaza into the Riviera? He couldn't even turn Atlantic City into a nicer Atlantic City. Crazy. If anything, they tore down so many of his casinos, he turned Atlantic City into Gaza. But okay, he wants to rebuild it, and he wants to turn it into Mar-a-Lago. At least the Palestinians will have a place to go back to.
Donald Trump calling for the permanent resettlement of roughly 2 million Palestinians.
I don't think people should be going back to Gaza. I think that Gaza has been very unlucky for them.
And he says he's willing to use the U.S. military to do it.
We'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that.
Just so I'm clear, your idea is to take over Gaza, rebuild it into Mar-a-Lago, and make sure that the Palestinians who live there can't go back? That is the craziest thing he said since yesterday and until tomorrow. Even his chief of staff was shocked. Look at her face. like she won Best Country Album at the Grammys. Of course she's shocked. He's effectively advocating for ethnic cleansing. Who could possibly be okay with that?
You see things others refuse to see. You say things others refuse to say. And after the jaws drop, people scratch their heads and they say, you know, he's right.
No, they usually scratch their heads and they say, what the f are you talking about? Of course, Bibi is ecstatic at Trump's idea. Look at him. He looks happier than a teenager getting a hand job in the back of a birthright bus. But Bibi aside, this proposal is giving a lot of people whiplash. Trump ran his whole campaign on America first, and now he's out there chanting from the Riviera to the sea. Even Trump's Republican allies aren't on board, although, of course, they have to let him down easy.
We're trying to get the details of it. It was a surprising development. Senator Josh Hawley says, quote, I don't know that I think it's the best use of U.S. resources to spend a bunch of money in Gaza.
We also heard from Senator Lindsey Graham. I think most South Carolinians would probably not be excited about sending Americans to take over Gaza. I think that might be problematic.
Tom Tillis likely with the quote of the night, which was, there are probably a couple kinks in that slinky.
There's a couple kinks in that slinky. That's how desperate these guys are to not openly disagree with Trump. They're just making up sayings now. Of course, some of his supporters, like Steve Doocy, are trying to give Trump the benefit of the doubt.
It was a jaw-dropper last night. The cover of the New York Post is, we'll take over Gaza. I think this is just the tipping, this is the conversation starter. Because obviously, the president knows when he says, we'll take Gaza. He knows the United States can't invade another country.
Of course, America would never invade another country. You can read all about it in Steve Doocy's American history book, Me Just Got Lobotomy by Steve Doocy. So to summarize, MAGA people think this is dicey. Their eyeballs think it's batshit crazy. And the entire plan is DOA unless Trump can do some real outreach to the countries in the Middle East. And based on his response to reporters from Afghanistan, I don't think he has the skills to do it.
I'm from Afghanistan. My name is Ms. Desi Lydic. As I expectation from you. Do you have any plan to change Afghanistan situation?
I have a little hard time understanding you. Where are you from? Oh. Actually, it's a beautiful voice and a beautiful accent. The only problem is I can't understand a word you're saying. But I just say this, good luck, live in peace.
Good luck, live in peace? Why does he sound like he's saying goodbye to E.T.? The people of Earth wish you peace. May your slinky have no kinks. Yesterday, Donald Trump unveiled his big plan to relocate Gazans and turn their homeland into the world's holiest Hard Rock hotel and casino. And today, the reviews are in. The Arab world hates it. Democrats condemn it. Republicans have problems with it. And the Palestinians won't abide by it. Or as Trump says...
Can we ask about your Gaza proposal? A lot of people are talking about, obviously,
everybody loves it.
I stand corrected. I guess everybody loves it. And even though the plan was totally perfect in every way, his staff spent the entire next day walking back every single part of it.
The president said his intention was to remove Palestinians from Gaza permanently.
If we can get a beautiful area to resettle people permanently.
But today, the press secretary said it would be temporary.
The president has made it clear that they need to be temporarily relocated out of Gaza for the rebuilding of this effort.
Aww. Trump's press secretary just had her first walk back. This is an important rite of passage for Trump's spokespeople, their bull mitzvah, if you will. She was spending so much time walking back the plan that at one point she ran out of English words.
This is an uninhabitable place for human beings.
Yeah, so true. Remind me how it got unhabilitable again? Even worse for Caroline, while she was scrambling to salvage Trump's plan, Trump was on Truth Social readjusting it on the fly, which left everybody even more confused.
Breaking just a short time ago, President Trump seemed to backtrack, but also to double down on his plan to take over Gaza.
A backtrack and a double down? And now, on the uneven bars, Donald Trump will attempt the rare combination backtrack, double down. Now let's see if he breaks every bone in his body. But while his team tries to fix his Gaza plan, Donald Trump has already moved on because he's basically the norovirus. Every day he spews executive orders all over the place, and while we struggle to clean up all the puke, he comes out the other end with something even worse. He tried to buy out the entire workforce of the CIA. His DOJ is going after anyone who's investigated him. And now he has defeated America's biggest threat.
At the White House today, President Trump signing an executive order banning transgender women and girls from competing in women's sports.
With this executive order, the war on women's sports is over. We're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding.
You notice how he paused right before invade your locker rooms? Like, maybe we won't make that illegal. Should have proofread this. Look, it's bad enough that he's banned trans women from sports, but spare us the performance of pretending that this is a top issue for women in this country. Maybe start with, I don't know, reproductive rights or pay inequality. Or why it's 2025 and still none of my clothes have pockets. Now, you might be wondering, is this really going to be the entire Trump presidency, just divisive executive orders every day for the next 4 years? Probably, but on the bright side, he did have one executive order today that felt relatively harmless.
I have signed an executive order to resume the process of creating a new national park full of statues of the greatest Americans who ever lived. It would be called the National Garden of American Heroes, and I hope that Congress will fully fund this wonderfully unifying project at the first possible opportunity.
Excuse me, sir. Americans already have a national garden, and it sells unlimited breadsticks. I never thought I'd say this, but Elon, I got some government waste for you right here. Does anyone have the phone number of the Department of Government Efficiency? Actually, they're all 12-year-olds. Does anyone have the Roblox usernames of the Department of Government Efficiency?